Most people believe wealth announces itself loudly: mansions, stock tickers, luxury cars. But real wealth often hides quietly, disguised as something ordinary. Today's story begins with a coin so common that millions of Americans have held it without a second thought: a quarter. 25 cents. The 1965 Washington quarter with no mint mark. And yet, under extraordinary circumstances, this unassuming coin has been associated with valuations approaching $956,000, almost $1 million. If that sounds unbelievable, good, because disbelief is exactly what causes people to miss opportunities that change lives. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself this uncomfortable question: how many times have you spent a quarter without looking at it? If the answer is too many to count, you're not alone. And that's precisely why this story matters, because fear doesn't always come from loss. Sometimes fear comes from realizing what you might have already let go. And excitement, that comes from knowing it may not be too late. The year 1965 was a turning point in American coinage. Silver was removed from circulating quarters, replaced with a copper nickel-clad composition. To the average person, that change meant nothing. To collectors and historians, it meant everything. The U.S. Mint was under enormous pressure to produce coins fast, and when speed meets scale, mistakes happen. Very rare mistakes. Some 1965 quarters were struck in ways they were never supposed to be, creating error coins that were never meant to exist in the first place. No mint mark, unusual characteristics, wrong plan case, transitional errors, coins that slipped through unnoticed, hiding in plain sight for decades. Here's where the story becomes uncomfortable, and slightly humorous if you let it. Somewhere in America, a coin collector once paid more for a cup of coffee than for a quarter that would later be valued near $1 million. Imagine that realization sinking in years later. Suddenly that latte doesn't taste so good, does it? This is your first pattern interrupt, because once you see coins differently, you can never unsee them again. What makes a 1965 no-mint mark Washington quarter reach such astonishing value is not luck, it's demand. High-level collectors don't chase ordinary coins, they chase anomalies. Coins that challenge history, coins that shouldn't exist, coins that rewrite what we thought we knew. When one of these error quarters surfaces in exceptional condition and is authenticated by elite grading institutions, the market reacts with intensity. The bidding isn't casual, it's competitive, it's emotional, it's driven by wealthy individuals who understand scarcity better than anyone else in the room. And here's the urgency you need to hear clearly: these coins are not being made again. Every year, more disappear into private collections, vaults, estates, and long-term holdings. The supply only moves in one direction: down. Meanwhile, demand continues to rise as alternative investments attract those who already have everything else. Stocks fluctuate, real estate cycles, rare coins with documented errors do not replicate. That imbalance creates pressure. Pressure creates value. At this point, some people feel excitement, others feel fear. Both emotions are useful if you channel them correctly. Excitement should push you to act. Fear should push you to pay attention. Because the greatest risk is not that your quarter is worthless. The greatest risk is assuming it is, without ever knowing for sure. And yes, before you ask, cleaning a coin is still the fastest way to destroy its value. Think of it like power washing a Rembrandt. Please don't. This brings us to the heart of the story. Wealth rarely announces itself with certainty. It whispers, it hides, it waits for someone observant enough to listen. The individuals who live financially free lifestyles didn't stumble into wealth by accident. They recognized value where others saw clutter. Old jars, forgotten drawers, inherited collections, coins dismissed as spare change. The 1965 no-mint mark Washington quarter error represents that mindset perfectly. Ordinary to most, extraordinary to the few who know what to look for. And let's reset your attention for a moment with the simple thought: if a quarter can be worth nearly $1 million, what else have we been underestimating our entire lives? That question alone is worth more than 25 cents. As we reach the final act, the story becomes personal. This is no longer about history or collectors or auctions. This is about you, about decisions made after this video ends, whether you choose curiosity over assumption, whether you choose verification over dismissal, whether you decide that your financial future is worth a closer look at the past. The people who profit from rare coins are not gamblers. They are investigators. They verify. They authenticate. They act deliberately. The 1965 Washington quarter with no mint mark is not a guarantee of wealth, but it is proof of possibility. And possibility is where every wealthy outcome begins. Somewhere in America right now, a coin is sitting quietly, waiting to be recognized for what it truly is. The only unanswered question is whether that coin is already in your possession, or whether you will spend it without ever knowing what it could have become. Most people never realize the moment opportunity passes them by. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't knock. Sometimes it hides quietly in a kitchen drawer, a cigar box, or an old coffee can under the bed. And today, that opportunity may be staring back at you from a simple silver gray coin dated 1966. If you think a quarter is just spare change, stay with me because this one mistake has reportedly pushed the Washington quarter's value to nearly $987,000. Yes, almost $1 million, a broken bar for a coin most Americans have handled without a second thought. And before you dismiss this as impossible, ask yourself one question. When was the last time you actually looked closely at your old coins? This story begins in the mid-1960s. A time when the U.S. Mint was under enormous pressure. Silver was disappearing from circulation, demand for coins was exploding, and the government made the controversial decision that changed American coinage forever. In 1966, the Mint removed mint marks entirely, meaning no D, no S, nothing at all. The goal was to discourage hoarding. Ironically, that decision would later create one of the most mysterious and valuable quarters collectors have ever chased. Because when stress, speed, and silence collide inside a minting facility, errors happen, and when errors happen at the wrong moment in history, fortunes are born. Now here's where things get interesting, and a little uncomfortable. Because fear is part of this story. The fear that you may have already spent something priceless. The fear that you inherited coins and never checked them. The fear that the wealth others quietly unlock was once in your hands. Certain 1966 Washington quarters were struck with rare minting anomaly as subtle, nearly invisible to the untrained eye. Errors involving plan case, strike pressure, alignment, and transitional metal composition have turned ordinary-looking coins into legendary rarities. And when one of these pieces appears in exceptional condition, certified and verified, demand doesn't whisper, it roars. At elite auctions and private transactions, collectors with deep pockets don't hesitate because they understand something most people don't. Rarity is not about age alone, it's about circumstance. A verified 1966 no mint mark Washington quarter with a confirmed error, preserved in high grade, has been associated with valuations approaching $987,000 in today's aggressive collector market. That number isn't about hype, it's about scarcity, competition, and prestige. Owning one isn't just about money, it's about status, it's about control, it's about stepping into a world where assets fit in the palm of your hand yet rival luxury real estate in value. Let's pause for a second because this is usually where people laugh nervously and say, "Come on, it's just a quarter." And that's exactly why so many miss out. Humor me for a moment. If someone offered you a chance to check your own change for something that could change your financial future, would you really say no because it sounds too simple? Wealth often hides behind things that feel ordinary. That's not coincidence. That's how opportunity filters out the impatient. As this story moves forward, urgency becomes impossible to ignore. These coins are not being made anymore. They are not increasing in number. Every year, more are lost, damaged, or improperly cleaned, permanently destroying their value. At the same time, demand is rising. More Americans are turning to tangible assets. More collectors are entering the market. more money is chasing fewer truly rare coins. That is not a trend yet, it's a warning sign. The window narrows quietly, and then it closes. And here's the empowering part. This is not a story about luck. It's a story about awareness, about taking 5 minutes to look instead of assuming, about treating what you already own with respect instead of neglect. Because the people who live wealthy lifestyles didn't all start with wealth. Many started with information and the courage to act on it before everyone else caught on. So if you have old quarters, inherited collections, or coins you've never examined closely, understand this. History has already proven that a single overlooked detail can separate pocket change from life-changing money. The 1966 no-mint Mark Washington quarter is not just a coin. It's a reminder that wealth doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it waits patiently, hoping you'll finally pay attention. Most people believe that wealth looks like skyscrapers, stock charts, or luxury cars. But sometimes, wealth looks like a small, ordinary quarter sitting quietly at the bottom of a drawer. Right now, somewhere in the United States, a 1986p Washington quarter is being overlooked, ignored, or casually spent while collectors would pay nearly $1 million to own it. And here's the unsettling part. The person who owns it probably has no idea. If that makes you uncomfortable, good, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why ignoring old coins is no longer harmless, it's expensive. This story begins in 1986 at the Philadelphia Mint, marked by a small letter P on millions of Washington quarters. At the time, these coins were nothing special. Gas was cheap, phones had cords, and quarters were just quarters. But history has a strange way of hiding opportunity in plain sight. What most Americans don't realize is that a small number of these 1986p quarters were struck with rare minting errors so unusual, so perfectly timed, and so difficult to replicate that today they are classified as elite collectibles. And in the world of high-end numismatics, elite means power, demand, and serious money. Here's where the tension begins to rise. While most 1986p quarters are worth face value, a microscopic percentage escaped the mint with dramatic errors, off-center strikes, double die obverses, misaligned dies, and transitional anomalies that should never have passed inspection. These weren't mistakes anyone noticed at the time. They entered circulation quietly, passed through countless hands, and vanished into everyday life. Which raises an uncomfortable question: how many were spent a broken bar and how many are still out there, hiding in collections, jars, or inherited boxes no one has opened in decades? Now pause for a moment. Be honest. When was the last time you actually looked at your change? Not glanced, looked. Most people don't. That's not laziness, it's conditioning. We've been trained to believe money only comes from work, investments, or luck. Coins feel small, insignificant, and that belief has cost people fortunes. Somewhere out there is a person who once used a coin worth $975,000 to buy a cup of coffee. That's not a metaphor, that's reality. And yes, that should make you nervous. What transforms a simple quarter into a near $1 million asset is not just rarity, it's perfection with an imperfection. Collectors don't chase mistakes because they are flawed, they chase them because they represent moments when the system failed and produced something unrepeatable. The most valuable 1986p Washington quarters show dramatic doubling in Washington's profile, distorted lettering, or alignment errors so precise they could only occur for a brief window during mint production. Once discovered, these coins are removed from the market almost instantly. Demand explodes, supply vanishes, prices follow. And here's where excitement overtakes fear. The current market value of a top-tier, professionally graded 1986p era quarter has climbed as high as $975,000, driven by private collectors, auction houses, and investment funds that treat rare coins as tangible wealth. These buyers aren't gambling, they're preserving capital. They understand something most people don't. Rare coins are immune to inflation, immune to market crashes, and immune to digital risk. You can't hack a quarter, you can't delete it, and you certainly can't print another one. Now let me interrupt this for a second with a simple question because attention matters. If someone offered you a sealed envelope and said, there might be $1 million inside, or there might be nothing, would you open it? Of course you would. Yet millions of Americans are sitting on coin collections that function exactly like sealed envelopes, unopened, unchecked, dismissed as clutter. That's not caution, that's hesitation. And hesitation is expensive. As we move deeper into his story, notice how every point connects. The past creates rarity, rarity creates demand, demand creates value, and value creates freedom. This is why serious collectors move quietly and decisively. They don't brag, they acquire. Because once a coin like this enters a private collection, it often disappears from the public market for decades. Every year that passes reduces supply. Every year that passes increases pressure. And pressure is what turns six-figure coins into seven-figure legends. There's also urgency here, and it's not artificial. The generation that saved coins, jars, and rolls, the generation that lived through the 60s, 70s, and 80s is aging. Collections are being inherited, liquidated, or unknowingly broken apart. This creates a narrow window where rare coins resurface before vanishing again into vaults. Smart sellers recognize this moment. They authenticate, grade, and position their coins when demand peaks. Others wait and watch opportunity slip through their fingers. Let's reset attention for a moment with something lighter. Imagine explaining to your family that the quarter they almost donated was worth nearly $1 million. Thanksgiving would be broken bar unforgettable. Funny now, painful later. Humorous side. This is why knowledge changes outcomes. The wealthy aren't luckier, they're informed earlier. As this story reaches its final act, the message becomes clear. The 1986p Washington quarter is no longer just currency. In rare error form, it is a legacy asset, a financial bridge between generations, a quiet reminder that wealth doesn't always announce itself, it whispers, and only those who listen closely get to respond. So here's the final connection. Fear alerts you to risk, excitement reveals opportunity, urgency forces action. Together, they form clarity. If you own old coins, inherited collections, or even forgotten change, the smartest move you can make isn't selling it's understanding. Because the difference between 25 cents and $975,000 isn't luck, it's awareness. What if I told you that a single quarter, minted in the United States in 1981, could be worth as much as $953,000 today? Not a gold bar, not a rare painting, a quarter. And the unsettling question is this: what if you once had died a broken bar and spent it? This is not a fantasy story. This is the true power of rarity, precision, and timing. The 1981p Washington quarter, struck at the Philadelphia Mint, exists in millions of ordinary examples. Yet among them, a microscopic fraction contain minting errors so rare, so desirable, that elite collectors quietly compete for them behind closed doors. These coins do not shout, they whisper, and only those who know how to listen recognize their value. Act 1 begins with a moment most people overlook. In 1981, the U.S. Mint was under pressure. Production demands were high, quality control was strained, and subtle mistakes slipped through. Tiny deviations in strike, alignment, and metal flow created coins that were never meant to exist. These errors were not announced, they were released into circulation like secrets. And today, those secrets are worth more than most homes. Here's where excitement meets fear. Because while one pristine 1981p error quarter has reached a market valuation approaching $953,000, thousands of similar coins were unknowingly spent at gas stations, grocery stores, and vending machines. Imagine that realization for a moment. Not to create regret but awareness. Because the next discovery doesn't belong to the past, it belongs to whoever checks next. Now let's pause for a second. Be honest, when was the last time you actually looked at a quarter? Not glanced at it but studied it. Most people trust that valuable things look valuable. That's the joke. Rare coins don't look rich, they look ordinary. That's why they survive. Act 2 is where knowledge separates the fortunate from the wealthy. The most valuable 1981p Washington quarters are not valuable because of age alone. They are valuable because of rarity combined with exceptional preservation. Off-center strikes, doubled dies, misaligned designs, and plankett anomalies transformed a common coin into an artifact of mint history. Collectors don't just buy metal, they buy mistakes that can never be repeated. And here's the part most people miss. Demand for these coins is not fading up, it's intensifying. As more Americans search for alternative assets outside traditional markets, rare coins have quietly become a store of wealth. High-net-worth collectors are not scrolling social media looking for bargains. They are acquiring certified rarities through auctions, private brokers, and estate sales. When one of those coins surfaces, competition is silent but fierce. Let's reset your attention with the simple question. If someone offered you $953,000 for something you already own, would you take 5 minutes to check? That's not greed, that's intelligence. The urgency here is real, and it's positive. Every year, fewer untouched 1981p error quarters exist. Coins are damaged, cleaned, or lost. Certification standards tighten. The market doesn't wait. Value favors the prepared. Those who recognize potential before it becomes obvious are always the ones who benefit most. Act 3 is where opportunity becomes action. The individuals who successfully sell rare coins for substantial money are not lucky, they are informed. They resist the instinct to dismiss what looks ordinary. They protect their coins. They verify authenticity. And when the time is right, they enter a market that rewards patience with extraordinary returns. Picture this scenario: an old drawer, a forgotten coin jar, a quiet afternoon decision to look closer instead of walking past. That's how stories of financial transformation actually begin, not with noisy but with curiosity. And yes, there's humor in this truth. A quarter, 25 cents, the same coin people toss into cup holders and couch cushions. Meanwhile, one example sits in a climate-controlled vault, insured, admired, and valued near $1 million. Same denomination, completely different destiny. The deeper message is not just about coins, it's about perspective. Wealth often flows to those who pay attention when others don't. The 1981p Washington quarter is not just a collectible, it's a reminder that opportunity is often disguised as something familiar. As we reach the end, understand this: the market does not reward hesitation forever. Knowledge creates timing, timing creates leverage, and leverage creates freedom. Whether you're holding a rare coin today or simply learning how to recognize one tomorrow, you are positioning yourself differently than most people. So before you dismiss your spare change, ask yourself one final question. What if the smallest object you own holds the greatest potential you've never unlocked? What if real wealth hides quietly, unnoticed, sitting in a drawer, a jar, or the back of a wallet? What if one of the most powerful financial opportunities of your lifetime weighs less than 6 grams and was minted in the United States in 1987? Before you dismiss that thought, pause for just a moment. A broken bar, because history has already proven that a single 1987d Washington quarter dollar, yes, a coin most Americans have spent without a second glance, has been connected to market valuations approaching $963,000. And the uncomfortable truth is this: the people who missed it are the ones who assumed they knew better. Act 1 begins with what everyone thinks they understand. The Washington quarter is ordinary, common, safe to ignore. Millions were minted, especially in Denver in 1987. A year few collectors paid attention to. But here's the irony: when attention disappears, opportunity often enters. While the public moved on, a small circle of elite collectors and numismatic analysts began noticing something unsettling. Certain 1987d quarters were not ordinary at all. They carried rare minting errors, Subtle abnormalities so easy to overlook that even seasoned professionals initially miss them. Ask yourself honestly, how many times have you checked a quarter before spending it? Exactly. That moment of neglect is where fortunes are lost. Now here's where excitement replaces comfort. The errors tied to these quarters are not dramatic cracks you can spot from across the room. They are precision mistakes, double die impressions, misaligned strikes, abnormal plancades, errors that should never have escaped the U.S. Mint, and yet they did. When these anomalies appear on a coin that has survived decades in near-perfect condition, something remarkable happens. The market reacts, demand intensifies, competitive bidding begins. Prices climb not because someone hopes the coin is valuable, but because documented sales, private negotiations, and collector scarcity prove it is. At this level, coins stop being collectibles and start behaving like assets. This is where quarters stop buying coffee and start buying freedom. Act 2 is where fear enters the room, and fear is not always negative. Fear sharpens focus. Fear asks the dangerous question, what if I already had one and let it go? Because that has happened more times than anyone likes to admit. Coins like this were spent, lost, or dumped into change machines without a second thought. That's the fear of missed opportunity. But there's another fear too, the fear of acting too late. The rare coin market does not reward hesitation. As wealth continues to move away from traditional savings and into tangible assets, high-grade U.S. error coins are being locked into private collections. Once they're gone, they don't come back. Scarcity tightens, prices respond, and suddenly, the door that was wide open is barely cracked. Let's reset for a second. A quick question. If I offered you a sealed envelope and said there was either 25 cents inside or the down payment on a luxury home, would you at least look inside before throwing it away? Of course you would. And yet, that's exactly what happens every day with unexamined coins. Humorous side, this is serious. The collectors who live well, travel freely, and build generational wealth through coins are not gamblers. They are observers. They understand that rarity plus demand plus condition equals power. The 1987 Washington quarter era coins sit precisely at that intersection. Act 3 is where urgency transforms into action and inspiration becomes strategy. The current market conversation surrounding top-tier examples of those era quarters hovers near $963,000, not because someone claims it loudly on the internet, but because elite buyers are quietly willing to pay for scarcity they cannot replace. This is not about hype, this is about positioning. If you own old coins, especially from the 1980s, you are not late, you are early, if you move with intention. The difference between those who build wealth and those who watch others build it is often one decision, to look closer when others look away. The lifestyle you admire, the comfort, the security, the ability to choose how you live is rarely built overnight. Sometimes it begins with curiosity, sometimes with the single coin, and sometimes with the courage to ask, what if this is worth more than I think? The 1987 Washington quarter does not promise wealth, but it offers possibility. And in today's economy, possibility backed by historical demand is not something to ignore. So before you spend another coin without thinking, remember this: wealth does not always arrive in bold packaging. Sometimes it wears the face of George Washington and waits patiently for someone wise enough to recognize its value. The question is not whether rare coins can change lives. That's already been proven. The real question is whether you will check before someone else does. Most people think wealth announces itself loudly: a lottery ticket, a stock tip, a business breakthrough. But sometimes, real wealth whispers. It hides in places you've already looked 100 times and dismissed. Let me ask you something that might make you uncomfortable for a moment. What if the most valuable asset you'll ever own has already passed through your hands, a broken bar, and you didn't notice? Because today's story is about a coin most Americans have seen, spent, or tossed into a jar without a second thought. The 1988 Washington quarter, and why one specific version of it has been associated with values approaching $967,000. Yes, nearly $1 million for a quarter. If that sounds unbelievable, good. That disbelief is exactly why so many fortunes are missed. In 1988, The Denver Mint produced millions of Washington quarters intended for everyday circulation, gas stations, grocery stores, parking meters. Nothing special, or so it seemed. But as with many great financial stories, the value wasn't in what was planned, that was in what went wrong. Somewhere in that massive production run, a small number of quarters were struck with critical minting errors. Errors so subtle they escaped quality control, so rare they slipped into circulation unnoticed, and so desirable today that collectors quietly compete for them behind closed doors. And here's the part that should make you lean a little closer. Many of these coins were never pulled from circulation. They were spent, saved, forgotten, sitting right now in dresser drawers, safety deposit boxes, inherited collections, or jars that haven't been opened in decades. Now let's pause for a second and reset your attention, because your brain might be saying, "Come on, this sounds like one of those internet coin myths." Fair enough. Healthy skepticism is smart. But ask yourself this: why do elite collectors and high-net-worth investors pay six figures and more for metal discs they can't even legally spend? They're not chasing nostalgia. They're chasing scarcity, documented error varieties, and market demand that quietly grows while the rest of the world scrolls past. The 1988 quarter error story isn't about fantasy. It's about condition, precision, and timing. If you're watching this, may suddenly be on your side. Certain 1988 quarters exhibit dramatic strike anomalies, double design elements, incorrect plan case, or die errors that fundamentally alter the coin's identity. These are not flaws in the collector world, they are signatures, proof that the coin should not exist as it does. And when such a coin survives decades without wear and is later authenticated at the highest levels, its value no longer follows logic, it follows desire. That is how a coin with a face value of 25 cents enters conversations involving prices like $967,000, not because every example is worth that amount, but because the right example, in the right condition, at the right moment, becomes irreplaceable. Here's where urgency quietly enters the room. The market for elite terror coins is tightening. More collectors, fewer undiscovered pieces, more competition, and less tolerance for sellers who don't know what they have. This is not a buyer's market for rare coins, it's a seller's market for informed owners. And the greatest risk isn't that you don't own something valuable. The greatest risk is that you do, and you treat it like spare change. Think about how many coins you've inherited. How many collections were passed down with a simple, "These might be worth something someday." What if someday is now? And what if waiting is the most expensive mistake? Let's add a little humor to lighten the tension, because this part tends to hit people emotionally. Imagine telling your future self, "I had that coin, but I used it for a vending machine." Painful, right? Almost funny, almost tragic. And yet it happens every single year. Coins like these don't announce themselves with flashing lights. They require curiosity, patience, and the courage to slow down when everyone else is rushing. Wealth, real wealth, often rewards the person who pauses. As awareness grows, values don't decline, they consolidate upward. Coins tied to documented errors from the late 20th century are increasingly viewed as finite assets. Once they're graded, locked into collections, or acquired by institutions, they vanish from the open market. That's why stories like the 1988 Washington quarter matter. They're not just about money, they're about positioning, about recognizing that opportunity doesn't always look like opportunity at first glance. Sometimes it looks ordinary, sometimes it looks familiar, sometimes it looks like something you already own. So here's the quiet truth that connects everything we've talked about. The difference between people who stumble into wealth and people who create it is attention. Attention to detail, attention to timing, attention to what others overlook. If you've ever wanted your lifestyle to reflect security, freedom, and control rather than stress and uncertainty, this is where those shifts begin, not with risk, but with awareness. The 1988 Washington quarter isn't just a coin. It's a reminder that value is often hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right eyes to recognize it. And as this story comes to a close, Consider this final thought. The next chapter of your financial life doesn't have to start with something new. It may start with something old, something overlooked, something already yours. The only question left is whether you'll look closely enough before someone else does. Most people believe wealth announces itself loudly. Expensive cars, luxury watches, mansions on hilltops, but sometimes, real wealth hides quietly a broken bar in a place no one suspects, like a single coin. A coin that looks ordinary, a coin you may have touched before and dismissed without a second thought. And today, that assumption could cost you $952,000, because somewhere in America, sitting inside drawers, jars, and forgotten collections, is the 1,987p Washington quarter, a coin so misunderstood, so overlooked, that many people unknowingly spend it for just 25 cents. And if that idea makes your stomach tighten a little, good, it should. Picture this for a moment. You're sorting through old belongings. Maybe they belong to a parent, a grandparent, or maybe they've just followed you through decades of life. You're not looking for treasure, you're just cleaning, and then you see it. A 1987 quarter, Philadelphia Mint. No excitement, no drama, just another coin in a broken bar, or so it seems. But what if that small, quiet piece of metal is actually a doorway to financial freedom? What if the difference between your current lifestyle and a wealthier, more secure future is already in your possession? That question alone has changed lives. This brings us to Act 1. The setup. The year is 1987. The Philadelphia Mint produces millions of Washington quarters, most destined for circulation, most destined to be ignored. But within that massive production run, something rare occurs. A minting anomaly, a subtle error, the kind that slips past machines and inspectors alike. And in the world of elite coin collecting, rarity born from imperfection is not a flaw, it's a multiplier. Collectors don't chase what's common, they chase what shouldn't exist. And when something shouldn't exist, demand ignites. Here's where things get interesting, and yes, a little uncomfortable, because the vast majority of people have no idea what they're holding. They assume rarity comes from age alone. They assume old means valuable, but true wealth in numismatics comes from precision, scarcity, and error. That 1,987p quarter you might be ignoring doesn't scream for attention. It whispers, and only those who know how to listen hear it. Everyone else, they spend it on coffee. And if that makes you nervous, you're paying attention. Good. Now we enter Act 2, the confrontation. This is where belief meets reality. The 1,987p Washington quarter era coins exist in extremely limited numbers, and high-grade examples with verified mint anomalies have entered a market driven by aggressive collectors, investment funds, and private buyers who already understand one thing. Tangible assets with historical scarcity outperform emotion-driven investments over time. In today's market, a top-tier example of this coin has reached valuations approaching $952,000, not because of hype, because of demand. Because when supply is nearly non-existent and desire is global, price becomes irrelevant. Let's pause for a second and reset your attention. Imagine explaining to your younger self that a single quarter could someday be worth more than most homes. You'd probably laugh. Then you'd ask, why didn't anyone tell me? That's the question people ask too late. And the uncomfortable truth is this: information has always been available, but timing favors the prepared. Right now, the coin market is experiencing renewed interest from investors seeking stability, privacy, and legacy wealth. Coins like the 1,987p era quarter are no longer curiosities, they're assets. And here's where fear quietly enters the room. Because every year, coins like these are lost, damaged, cleaned improperly, or sold cheaply by people who never knew their true value. Imagine discovering that you once owned something that could have changed your financial future, a broken bar, and realizing you let it go. That's not regret you want to carry, especially when awareness alone can prevent it. But this story isn't about loss, it's about recognition. It's about shifting how you see what you already own. Wealthy individuals think differently. They don't rush, they don't assume, they verify, they protect value before revealing it. And that mindset alone separates those who stumble upon wealth from those who secure it. The 1987p Washington quarter is not just a coin, it's a test of awareness. Now we arrive at Act 3, the resolution. The moment clarity replaces doubt, the realization that hidden wealth doesn't belong only to museums or elite collectors. It belongs to those willing to look closer. The demand for rare U.S. error coins continues to grow, driven by buyers who understand scarcity, history, and long-term value. And while not every coin will reach 6 or 7 figures, the possibility alone demands respect, because all it takes is one verified example to change everything. So the next time you encounter a note quarter, don't rush past it. Don't assume its story is finished. Ask yourself a better question. What if this isn't spare change, a broken bar, but silent wealth waiting to be recognized? Because those who live wealthy lifestyles rarely rely on luck. They rely on knowledge, timing, and the courage to look where others don't. What if I told you that a single quarter, yes, the same kind you might have dropped under your car seat or handed to a cashier without a second thought, could be worth $984,000 today? Not a gold bar, not a stock certificate, a quarter. And not just any quarter, but the 1989D Washington quarter, quietly minted in Denver, hiding in plain sight for decades. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Thousands of Americans once owned this coin, and most of them unknowingly spent it. That sound you just heard in your head? That's opportunity slipping through fingers. But here's the exciting part: not all of them are gone. Some are still out there, possibly closer than you think. Before you dismiss this as another exaggerated coin story, pause for a moment. Ask yourself this question: when was the last time you actually looked at your change? Not glanced at it, but truly looked. If your answer is "I can't remember," you're not alone, and that's exactly why this coin has become so valuable. Scarcity doesn't always begin at the mint. Sometimes, it begins with ignorance. The year 1989 was unremarkable to most people. The economy moved forward, pockets filled with loose change, and quarters flowed through hands at lightning speed. The Denver Mint struck millions of Washington quarters that year, each marked with the small but powerful D. On the surface, nothing unusual, but history often hides its most valuable secrets inside imperfections. And this coin story isn't about perfection, it's about error. Certain 1989D Washington quarters were struck with rare minting anomalies that should never have left the facility. We're talking about dramatic off-center strikes, double dies so subtle they escape detection, and planchet errors that turned an ordinary coin into a once-in-a-generation collectible. These were not mistakes meant for circulation, yet they slipped through. And when the wrong coin enters the right collector's hands, value explodes. Now here's where excitement turns into urgency. The current market valuation of a top-tier, authenticated 1989D error quarter has reached $984,000, not because of hype, not because of internet rumors, but because elite collectors compete aggressively for coins that combine rarity, condition, and story. Demand doesn't whisper in this market, it roars, and when supply is nearly non-existent, price becomes irrelevant. Let's interrupt ourselves for a second. Be honest, if someone offered you a quarter right now, you wouldn't even bend down to pick it up, would you? Funny how that same quarter could fund a retirement, buy a home outright, or change a family's future forever. That irony is exactly why seasoned collectors stay wealthy and informed collectors become wealthy. Fear enters the picture here, and it should. Fear of missing out, fear of unknowingly giving away something priceless, fear that the coin sitting in a drawer inherited from a parent or grandparent was never examined closely enough. But fear, when paired with knowledge, becomes power. Here's the shift that separates casual curiosity from serious opportunity. High-value coin markets don't reward luck, they reward attention. The individuals who profit from rare coins are not gamblers, they are observers. They understand that wealth often arrives quietly, disguised as something ordinary. And the 1989D Washington quarter is the perfect example of that principle. Collectors are not just buying metal, they are buying rarity, narrative, and finality. Once these coins are certified and locked into private collections, they disappear from the market, sometimes for decades. That's why demand remains intense and prices continue climbing. Every year that passes reduces the number of discoverable specimens. Time is not neutral here. Time is the enemy of opportunity. And let's inject a little humor before we go further. Imagine explaining to your financial advisor that your most profitable asset didn't come from stocks, real estate, or crypto but from a coin jar. The look alone would be worth framing. Yet this is exactly how quiet wealth is built, not through noise, but through insight. If you are between the ages of 30 and 65, living in the United States, and serious about upgrading your financial life, this message is not entertainment, it's information. Old coins are not old money, they are undeclared assets. Assets that don't appear on balance sheets until someone knowledgeable decides to look closer. The difference between someone who spends a rare coin and someone who sells it for life-changing money is not intelligence, it's awareness. And awareness creates urgency, because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. You begin to question every inherited collection, every forgotten drawer, every envelope labeled old change. Suddenly, the ordinary becomes suspect, and that's a very good thing. As this story comes full circle, remember this: the 1989 Washington quarter did not become valuable overnight. It became valuable because most people ignored it for 30 years. Wealth often accumulates in the shadows of neglect. And right now, demand for rare U.S. era coins is higher than ever, driven by collectors who understand that tangible assets tell stories, and stories hold value. So before you dismiss your spare change, before you spend another quarter without looking, pause. Because history has proven something remarkable. Sometimes, the difference between surviving and thriving, between average and extraordinary, is as small as 25 cents. Say if you know what you're holding. What if I told you that one of the most powerful financial opportunities in America has been hiding in plain sight: a broken bar in drawers, jars, glove compartments, and old coffee cans for over 30 years? Before you dismiss that idea, let me ask you a simple question that might make you slightly uncomfortable. When was the last time you actually looked at your spare change instead of ignoring it? Because today's story is about the single American coin, the 1992 Washington quarter, that has quietly crossed into the realm of nearly $1 million, and most people who owned it never even realized what they had. This is not a fantasy. This is not a get-rich-quick myth. This is a documented reality of how rare coin errors create sudden, explosive wealth for those who recognize them in time. And the uncomfortable truth is this: every year, coins like this are lost forever because someone didn't know what to look for. They were spent, dropped into vending machines, given away as change. That's the fear you should feel right now, and not panic, but awareness. Because once you see what others missed, you never look at money the same way again. Let's step back to 1992. America was changing. The economy was shifting. The U.S. Mint in Philadelphia was producing millions of Washington quarters, all stamped with the small but critical letter P. To the untrained eye, these coins were ordinary, forgettable, interchangeable, but hidden within that massive production run were a microscopic number of quarters struck under abnormal conditions, mint errors so rare that even seasoned collectors would go decades without seeing one in person. And this is where the story turns. Some 1992 Washington quarters were struck with dramatic minting anomalies, errors that should never have left the mint, let alone entered circulation. These were not cosmetic flaws. These were structural mistakes in the striking process itself, creating coins that simply should not exist. And in the world of elite coin collecting, what should not exist is exactly what becomes priceless. Here's where excitement enters the picture. Because one of these error quarters, authenticated and preserved in extraordinary condition, has reached a current market valuation approaching $987,000. Let that number sit with you for a moment. Nearly $1 million for a coin that once bought a newspaper. That's not luck. That's rarity colliding with demand. Now let me interrupt your thoughts for a second with a question that might make you smile. How many people do you think laughed at the person who kept old coins instead of cash? The same people who now say, "If only I had known." Humor aside, This is the difference between those who dismiss small things and those who understand that wealth often hides in details. Act 2 of this story is about recognition, because the people who profit from rare coins are not gamblers, they are observers. They understand that high net worth collectors are constantly searching for verified error coins, especially modern U.S. coinage that bridges the gaps between accessibility and extreme rarity. The 1992p Washington quarter sits in that perfect zone, old enough to be scarce, modern enough to be overlooked, and when an error example surfaces, demand becomes intense, immediate, and competitive. This demand is not emotional, it is strategic. Wealthy collectors want assets that are portable, historically anchored, and immune to inflation narratives. Rarer coins check every box. That's why when a legitimate, professionally graded 1992p error quarter enters the market, it doesn't wait to be sold. It is pursued. Now here's the urgency you need to hear. The supply of these coins is not growing. It will never grow. In fact, it is shrinking every year as undiscovered examples are damaged, cleaned, or lost. Meanwhile, interest in tangible wealth is increasing. That imbalance creates pressure, and pressure creates price acceleration. This is why waiting someday to check your coins is not neutral, it's costly. Act 3 is about choice, because right now, you are either someone who continues to assume wealth is complicated and distant, or someone who understands that extraordinary value can exist in ordinary places. If you own old quarters, inherited collections, or even random rolls of change from the 1990s, you are already closer to opportunity than most people will ever be. The only difference is awareness. And let's be clear, this is not about greed. This is about stewardship, about recognizing value where others don't, about protecting assets instead of spending them unknowingly. The wealthy don't ignore details, they respect them. And that mindset alone changes outcomes. Imagine the feeling and not the fantasy, but the real momentum of discovering that something you already owned carried life-altering value. The calm realization, the quiet confidence, the shift from uncertainty to control. That's what this knowledge offers. Not promises, perspective. So before you move on with your day, remember this: the most expensive mistake is not failing to find a rare coin. It's failing to look. Because somewhere in America right now, someone unknowingly owns a 1992p Washington quarter error worth nearly $1 million. And the only question that matters is whether that person could be you. What if I told you that one ordinary quarter, minted in the United States in 1996, could quietly be worth nearly $1 million today at a broken bar, and that most people who owned it already spent it without ever knowing? Before you dismiss that thought, ask yourself this: when was the last time you actually looked at a quarter before dropping it into a vending machine or handing it to a cashier? That moment of indifference is exactly how fortunes disappear. Today's story is not about fantasy. It's about the 1996 Washington quarter, a coin hiding in plain sight, connected to one of the most fascinating error-driven value surges in modern American numismatics. This is Act 1, Awareness. In 1996, the U.S. Mint was producing quarters at full speed, celebrating America's bicentennial spirit with massive output. The Denver Mint, marked with a small but powerful D, struck millions of Washington quarters that year. On the surface, nothing looked unusual. George Washington's familiar profile, the eagle on the reverse, the same size, weight, and feel Americans had trusted for decades. But history has a way of disguising opportunity. Within that massive production run, a microscopic fraction of coins escaped the mint with extraordinary minting errors and elite-grade characteristics that would later ignite intense demand among high-end collectors. Here's where fear quietly enters the room. Many of these coins passed through everyday hands. They were spent on coffee, parking meters, and groceries. They were lost in couches, jars, and glove compartments. And the uncomfortable truth is this: once a rare error coin is damaged, cleaned, or worn down, its highest value is gone forever. That is why collectors speak with urgency. Time is not neutral. Time either preserves wealth or destroys it. The 1996 quarter became a silent test of attention, and most people failed without ever knowing they were taking the exam. Now Act 2 begins. And this is where excitement takes over. Among surviving 1,996 quarters, a handful exhibit exceptional mint errors, striking anomalies created during the manufacturing process that should never have left the mint. Think of misaligned strikes, dramatic doubling in design details, planchet irregularities, or near-perfect surfaces combined with mechanical errors that create a coin no mint could ever intentionally reproduce. When such a coin is preserved in near-flawless condition and authenticated by top-tier grading services, the market responds aggressively. Collectors don't negotiate emotionally, they compete, and competition is what turns a quarter into an asset that can approach $977,000 in elite private and auction markets. At this point, let me interrupt the pattern for just a second with a simple question that often makes people laugh nervously when they hear it. If a stranger offered you a quarter from their pocket for $500,000, would you even bother to look at it first? Most people say yes, of course they would. But that's exactly the irony. Many people already own the opportunity and never looked. That's not bad luck. That's unawareness. And awareness, once gained, is something you never lose again. The 1996D quarter has become symbolic of a larger truth in the rare coin world. Modern coins can be just as valuable as ancient ones when rarity, condition, and error align perfectly. High-net-worth collectors actively seek these pieces not just for profit, but for prestige. Owning a top-tier modern-era coin signals knowledge. It signals patience. It signals entry into a financial culture where wealth is preserved quietly, intelligently, and legally through tangible assets that are immune to inflation narratives and market noise. As Act 2 deepens, urgency begins to rise. Every year, fewer untouched examples remain. Coins are damaged. Coins are mishandled. Coins are lost. Meanwhile, demand does not sleep. Wealthy collectors age into legacy planning. Private collections are locked away. Museums and long-term investors remove coins from circulation permanently. The supply shrinks while desire intensifies. That is the invisible pressure building beneath the surface of this market. And pressure, when released, is what creates explosive valuation moments that make headlines and change lives. Now we enter Act 3. Decision and transformation. This is the moment where information becomes leverage. If you are watching this and you live in the United States, there is a real possibility that a 1996D Washington quarter has passed through your hands or is still sitting somewhere you haven't checked yet, not because you were careless, but because no one ever taught you to look. The wealthy are not lucky. They are observant. They pause where others rush. They verify where others assume. And they understand that selling rare coins is not about desperation. It's about timing and authority. The lifestyle this world offers is not loud. It's confident. It's knowing that your wealth is backed by history, metal, and demand rather than promises. Those who successfully sell rare coins don't chase buyers, buyers chase them. They don't accept the first offer, they set the standard. And it always begins with a single decision to take something ordinary seriously enough to examine it properly. So here is the quiet but powerful truth that connects this entire story from beginning to end. The 1996D Washington quarter is not just a coin. It is a reminder that wealth often hides where attention is weakest. Fear exists because time is passing. Excitement exists because discovery is possible. Urgency exists because markets reward those who moved before the crowd. And inspiration exists because you are not too late. You are simply becoming aware. The most dangerous thing in your house right now might not be what you think. It's not debt. It's not inflation. It's not even the stock market. It could be a single quarter, a coin so ordinary, so overlooked, that millions of Americans have already spent it without a second thought. And yet, one specific version of the 1995D Washington quarter has been associated with a market valuation approaching $962,000. Imagine realizing that the key to a wealthy lifestyle wasn't hidden in a vault or a boardroom, but quietly resting in a drawer, a jar, or a forgotten wallet. If that thought makes you uncomfortable, good. That discomfort is the sound of opportunity knocking. This story begins like all great American stories do, with something familiar. The Washington quarter has passed through nearly every hand in the country. Coffee shops, toll booths, laundromats. You've held it, you've ignored it, and that's exactly why this story matters. In 1995, the Denver Mint produced millions of quarters, all bearing the small but powerful D Mint mark. Most were ordinary, but a microscopic number were not. A tiny group escaped the mint with rare and dramatic errors. Errors so unusual that elite collectors would later compete fiercely for ownership. And when collectors compete, prices don't climb a broken bar, they explode. Here's where excitement meets fear. Excitement because these coins still exist in the wild. Fear because many have already been lost forever. Think about how many coins you've spent without looking. Painful, isn't it? But stay with me, because awareness changes everything. The specific 1995D error coins that command extraordinary attention are not valuable by accident. They represent a perfect storm of rarity, preservation, and timing. In the coin world, timing is everything. As wealth has concentrated and alternative assets have surged in popularity, rare U.S. coins have become symbols of stability, prestige, and quiet power. Now let me reset your attention for a second with a simple question. If I offered you a lottery ticket with odds better than Wall Street and no expiration date, would you throw it away? Of course not. Yet people do exactly that with rare coins every single day. The humor here is dark, but real. A quarter that once bought gum can now buy freedom, a home. Time, as you know, is the real luxury. As the story moves into its second act, the tension rises, because owning a rare coin is not enough. The difference between a 25-cent quarter and a six-figure asset lies in knowledge and condition. Error coins from 1995D have been documented with dramatic striking anomalies, misalignments, and die variations that were never meant to leave the mint. These are not scratches from use. These are fingerprints of the minting process itself. Collectors crave them because they cannot be recreated. Once they're gone forever. Scarcity like that commands respect, and respect commands money. And here's the urgent truth most people don't want to hear. The window is closing. As more collectors enter the market and more coins are professionally graded and locked away, the number of undiscovered examples shrinks. Every year that passes increases the value of verified specimens and decreases the odds of finding one casually. This is why the coin market rewards decisiveness. The people who win are not the ones who wait for certainty. They are the ones who act while others hesitate. Let's pause again, because attention fades fast in a noisy world. Ready for a reality check? That old jar of coins you've been meaning to clean out one day has more potential upside than most savings accounts. And unlike the stock market, it doesn't crash overnight because of a headline. Rare coins moved differently. They moved quietly, confidently, like the people who own them. As we enter the final act of this story, clarity replaces tension. The individuals who have successfully sold high-value 1995D error quarters didn't stumble into wealth by luck alone. They educated themselves. They resisted the urge to clean or alter their coins. They sought professional authentication. And most importantly, they understood demand. Demand doesn't come from hype. It comes from trust, verification, and a global collector base willing to pay for certainty. When a coin is certified and recognized as elite, it enters a different economic universe altogether. This is where lifestyle enters the conversation. Wealth isn't just about numbers. It's about options. The ability to say number. The ability to choose time over obligation. Rare coins have quietly funded retirements, businesses, and generational security. And unlike flashy trends, they do not beg for attention. They command it. Owning a verified rare coin is like holding a silent asset that speaks volumes to those who understand its language. So here's the empowering takeaway. You don't need to be born wealthy to think wealthy. You need awareness, patience, and the courage to look twice at what others ignore. The 1995D Washington quarter error coin represents more than money. It represents the idea that opportunity still exists for those willing to slow down, learn, and act with intention. Before this video ends, let me leave you with one final question. What would hurt more? Discovering that you never bought a rare coin on a broken bar, or discovering years from now that you did, and you spent it without knowing? That question alone has changed how thousands of people look at their spare change. And once your perspective shifts, it never goes back. The story begins quietly, almost invisibly, the same way real wealth often does. Somewhere in America right now, a 2021 Washington quarter is sitting unnoticed. It might be resting in a desk drawer, tucked inside a coin jar, or hidden among everyday change. And yet, this ordinary-looking coin has ignited serious conversations in elite collecting circles, with whispers of a market value reaching as high as $956,000. That's right, nearly $1 million for a coin most people wouldn't even bother picking up off the ground. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The people who miss these opportunities usually don't miss them because they lack money. They miss them because they lack awareness. Now pause for just a second and ask yourself this. How many coins have passed through your hands in the last year without a second glance? Exactly. That's how fortunes are lost before they're ever found. The 2021 Washington quarter was minted in Philadelphia, during a time of unprecedented disruptions, staffing shortages, rushed production schedules, and quality control challenges that quietly opened the door to some of the most dramatic mint errors modern U.S. coinage has ever seen. These are not cosmetic imperfections. These are structural anomalies, errors so rare that when they surface, they immediately trigger intense competition among high-net-worth collectors who understand one thing very clearly: scarcity creates power. Here's where excitement begins to rise. Certain 2021 quarters have been discovered with striking anomalies, dramatic die errors, misaligned strikes, missing details, or metal flow distortions so pronounced they should never have passed inspection. These coins were never meant to exist. And when something was never meant to exist but does, the market pays attention. Collectors don't chase coins because they are old, they chase them because they are impossible to replace. And this is exactly why demand has exploded. When one of these error quarters appears at auction, the room doesn't just get quiet up, it gets tense, because everyone knows the same thing: you may never see another one like it again. Let's reset your attention for a moment with a question that sounds almost ridiculous, but isn't. What if the most valuable asset you've ever owned wasn't in your bank account, your home, or your retirement fund, but once bought you a cup of coffee? It sounds funny until it doesn't. And this is where fear enters the story, because every year that passes without checking your coins is another year you may unknowingly give away something that could have completely changed your financial trajectory. Regret is expensive, and in the coin world, it's permanent. As the story deepens, it becomes clear that the value isn't just about the error itself. It's about timing. The modern coin market has shifted. Wealthy collectors are aggressively moving away from traditional investments and into tangible assets that cannot be inflated, diluted, or digitally erased. Rare coins sit at the intersection of history, scarcity, and prestige. Owning one isn't just about money, it's about status. And when a modern coin like the 2021 Washington quarter enters that space with a verified, dramatic error, the demand becomes global. This is why valuations approaching $956,000 are no longer dismissed as fantasy. They are discussed seriously, behind closed doors, by people who buy rarity the way others buy real estate. Now here's a moment of humor because it helps reset the mind. Imagine telling someone at the grocery store that the quarter in their pocket could be worth more than their house. They'd laugh, then they'd stop laughing, and then they'd ask how to check. That shift from disbelief to urgency is exactly what separates casual viewers from people who act, because those who act are the ones who win. As we move toward the final act of this story, the message becomes crystal clear. This is not about luck. This is about positioning yourself where opportunity already exists. Coins like the 2021 Washington quarter are not valuable because everyone has them. They are valuable because almost everyone overlooks them. And while the supply is frozen forever, demand continues to grow as more collectors realize what slipped through the system during that year. Every month that passes tightens the market. Every new discovery raises the stakes. The most powerful part of this story is that it hasn't ended yet. Somewhere, another error coin is waiting to be found. It could be in your possession right now. And the difference between those who live comfortably and those who live exceptionally often comes down to a single moment of attention. Wealth favors the observant. It rewards those who pause, look closer, and refuse to assume that ordinary things have ordinary value. So here's the final thought to carry with you. History doesn't announce itself when it passes through your hands. It disguises itself as something small, something common, something easy to ignore. And sometimes, it's worth exactly 25 cents until it isn't. If this story opened your eyes, stay close, because the next discovery, the next opportunity, the next life-changing coin may already belong to you.